The alien jungle stretched endlessly before Marcus Chun, its violet canopy blocking out most of the twin suns overhead. Sweat dripped steadily down his face despite the cooling system in his tactical suit. 3 days had passed since his drop pod crashed on Kepler 442b, 3 days since he lost contact with the USS Defiant. The emergency beacon on his pod had been damaged beyond repair, leaving him with no choice but to move toward the colony's last known coordinates, 40 kilometers through hostile wilderness. Marcus adjusted the weight of his pack and checked his rifle's charge for the 100th time. 20 years as a Navy SEAL had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, every fiber of his being screamed danger. The forest was too quiet. On Earth, silence meant predators. Here, on an alien world teeming with creatures that could tear through steel, it likely meant death. He moved with practiced efficiency, each step calculated to minimize noise while maintaining speed. His enhanced combat suit, standard issue for special operations on hostile worlds, amplified his natural abilities. The heads-up display showed local atmospheric composition, temperature, and motion tracking within a 50-meter radius. So far, nothing had triggered the sensors, but Marcus knew better than to trust technology alone. The first sign of trouble came as a vibration through the ground. Marcus dropped to one knee behind a massive tree trunk, its bark resembling molten glass. Through his scope, he spotted movement in the undergrowth ahead. His finger moved to the trigger as shapes emerged from the shadows. They were unlike anything in the xenobiology briefings. For creatures, each standing 3 meters tall, covered in natural armor that looked like overlapping stone plates. Their heads were elongated, featuring multiple eyes that glowed with an eerie blue light. Massive claws extended from 6-fingered hands, and their muscular tails swayed with predatory grace. These were ravagers, apex predators known to hunt in packs and tear through colonial defenses like paper. Marcus calculated his options. His plasma rifle held enough charge for maybe 20 shots. Against 4 ravagers, those odds weren't encouraging. He could try to circle around, but their sensory organs were supposedly superior to any human technology. Fighting meant almost certain death. Running might buy minutes at most. Then, something impossible happened. The lead ravager, distinguished by scars crisscrossing its armored hide, stopped mid-stride. Its glowing eyes fixed on Marcus's position, and he knew he'd been spotted. His finger tightened on the trigger, ready to take at least one of them with him. But instead of charging, the creature did something that made Marcus question his sanity. It lowered itself to the ground in what could only be described as a bow. Marcus blinked, certain the stress and dehydration were causing hallucinations. But the image remained. The massive predator, capable of shredding a combat mech, was prostrating itself on the jungle floor. One by one, its packmates followed suit, their armored bodies creating furrows in the soft earth as they submitted. "What the hell?" Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible through his helmet's comm system. Keeping his rifle trained on the lead ravager, he slowly stood. The creatures remained motionless, their bioluminescent eyes dimmed in what appeared to be deference. Marcus had seen many strange things across dozens of worlds, but nothing compared to this. These weren't trained animals or uplift species with human-level intelligence. These were pure predators, driven by instinct and hunger, yet they bowed before him like subjects before a king. Cautiously, Marcus took a step forward. The ravagers didn't move. Another step, still nothing. His motion sensors showed their vital signs as calm, almost meditative. Whatever was happening defied every piece of intel humanity had gathered about these creatures. Marcus made a decision that went against every protocol in the book. He lowered his weapon. The effect was immediate. The lead ravager raised its head slightly, those multiple eyes studying him with an intelligence that shouldn't exist in a creature classified as subsapient. It made a low rumbling sound, not the threatening growl Marcus expected, but something almost respectful. "You understand me?" Marcus asked, feeling slightly foolish. The translator built into his suit could handle most known alien languages, but These creatures weren't supposed to have language. The Ravager tilted its massive head, then slowly rose to its full height. Even standing, it maintained a posture that suggested submission. It turned partially, gesturing with one clawed hand deeper into the jungle. The message was clear: follow. Marcus's training screamed against it. Following apex predators into unknown territory violated every survival instinct he developed. But those same instincts had kept him alive through situations that should have killed him a dozen times over. And right now, they were telling him something extraordinary was happening. He followed. The pack moved around him in a protective formation, their massive bodies creating a living shield. They guided him through paths invisible to human eyes, avoiding areas where his sensors detected high concentrations of toxins or unstable ground. It was like having expert guides who knew every danger in the jungle. As they traveled, Marcus noticed other creatures reacting to their presence. A swarm of razor wings, flying predators with monomolecular-edged feathers, veered away from their path. A massive serpent, its body thick as a tree trunk, slithered quickly in the opposite direction. Even the plants seemed to retract their poisonous thorns as the group passed. The Ravagers were feared. That much was clear. But why were they protecting him? 2 hours into their strange journey, Marcus got his first clue. They emerged into a clearing where ancient structures rose from the jungle floor. Not ruins, exactly, but something far older. The architecture was impossible, with angles that hurt to look at directly and materials that seemed to shift between solid and translucent. At the center of the clearing stood a pillar of black stone, covered in symbols that made Marcus's eyes water. The Ravagers stopped at the clearing's edge, none willing to go closer to the structures. The lead creature turned to Marcus and gestured toward the pillar with what seemed like reverence. Marcus approached slowly, his sensors going haywire with readings that made no sense. Energy signatures spiked and disappeared. Gravitational anomalies flickered in and out of existence. His suit's computer couldn't classify the material of the structures, listing it only as unknown, potentially exceeds current database parameters. As he neared the pillar, the symbols began to glow, not with any light his instruments could measure, but with something that bypassed his eyes entirely and burned directly into his consciousness. Images flooded his mind, vast beings of impossible scale traversing between galaxies, seeding worlds with life, establishing rules that would govern evolution for billions of years. And among these titans, Marcus saw something that stopped his heart. Humans, not as they were now, but as they had been members of this ancient race. The architects his mind supplied, though he couldn't say where the knowledge came from. They had shaped the galaxy, created the savage ecosystems that challenged and strengthened species, and then they had hidden themselves away. No, not hidden. They had chosen to forget, to become small and primitive to start over. Earth hadn't been humanity's beginning. It had been their second chance. The vision faded, leaving Marcus gasping inside his helmet. He turned to find not just the 4 Ravagers, but dozens of creatures gathered at the clearing's edge. Predators and prey stood side by side, all watching him with that same strange deference. They remembered. Somehow, in their genetic memory, these creatures remembered humanity's true nature. They recognized the descendants of their creators, even if humanity itself had forgotten. Marcus looked at his hands, seeing them differently now. The strength that had made him exceptional among humans wasn't random evolution. It was an echo of what they had been. The tactical brilliance, the adaptability, the sheer stubborn refusal to give up, all remnants of the race that had once shaped worlds. But why now? Why were these memories surfacing? Why did these creatures bow to him specifically? The lead Ravager approached slowly, stopping just outside arm's reach. It lowered its head and made a series of complex sounds. Marcus's translator struggled, then produced words that chilled him to his core. The enemy comes. The Makers must remember. The Makers must lead. Marcus felt the weight of the revelation settle on his shoulders. Somewhere out there, something threatened not just humanity's colonies, but all life the architects had seeded. These creatures, driven by genetic imperatives encoded eons ago, sought humanity's protection. They bowed not to Marcus the man, but to the legacy sleeping in his DNA. "I don't understand," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his mind. "I'm just one man. I'm not whatever you think I am." The Ravager's response came without hesitation. "You walked the path. You lowered your weapon. You chose trust over fear. You are maker-born, warrior-trained, spirit-awakened. Others sleep. You wake." Marcus thought of Earth, of humanity spreading across the stars, unaware of their true heritage. He thought of the colonies under threat, the endless wars with species they didn't understand. What if those conflicts existed because humanity had forgotten its role? What if they were meant to lead, not through conquest, but through the ancient bonds encoded in all life they had created? The gathered creatures waited, patient as stone. They needed an answer, a sign that the Makers would resume their responsibilities. Marcus felt the absurdity of it, one lost seal speaking for all humanity. But he also felt the rightness, the peace clicking in a place that had been missing his entire life. "I need to reach the colony," he said finally. "I need to warn them about this enemy you mentioned. Can you help me get there?" The lead Ravager's eyes flared brighter. "We serve. We protect. We remember. The path is dangerous, but Maker-born will reach Maker Nest. This we swear by old bonds." And so Marcus Chun, Navy SEAL and unwitting heir to an impossible legacy, set off through the alien jungle with an escort of nightmares turned protectors. Behind them, the ancient structures pulsed once with light, sending a signal across space and time. The Makers had begun to wake. The old bond stirred, and somewhere in the dark between stars, an enemy as old as the architects themselves took notice. The journey to the colony would test everything Marcus thought he knew about himself and humanity. But first, he had to survive the next 37 kilometers of jungle, where not every creature would remember or bow. Some had been corrupted, turned against their genetic programming by the approaching enemy. And they waited in the shadows, ready to test whether humanity truly deserved its forgotten throne. As the twin suns began to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Marcus and his strange honor guard pressed deeper into the wilderness. The real journey was just beginning. Every step took him further from the soldier he had been and closer to something humanity had forgotten how to be. The Makers were returning, whether the galaxy was ready or not. Night fell across the alien jungle like a living thing, bringing with it new dangers and strange beauty. Bioluminescent flora awakened, casting ethereal glows in blues and greens that turned the forest into an underwater dreamscape. Marcus moved at the center of his unusual protective detail, his night vision systems barely necessary with the natural lighting provided by the local ecosystem. The Ravagers had been joined by other creatures as they traveled. Six-legged runners with crystalline fur that tinkled like wind chimes. Massive beetle-like beings whose carapaces could deflect heavy weapons fire. Even a pair of aerial hunters circled overhead, their membranous wings silent as they scouted the path ahead. It was a parade of predators, all united in protecting the human in their midst. Marcus tried to process what he had learned at the ancient structure. The implications were staggering. If humanity truly descended from these architects, it rewrote everything science thought it knew about human evolution. It explained so much: why humans alone among Earth species had developed such complex technology so quickly, why they felt driven to explore the stars, why they could adapt to environments that killed other species. But it also raised terrifying questions. What enemy could threaten beings capable of seeding life across galaxies? And if that enemy was returning, was modern humanity ready to face it? "Contact ahead," his suit's AI announced, breaking his reverie. Multiple life forms, configurations suggest hostile intent. The Ravager pack leader, whom Marcus had mentally dubbed Scar, growled low. The sound rippled through the assembled creatures, each taking defensive positions with military precision. Marcus raised his rifle, checking the charge. Still 15 shots. Not nearly enough if things went bad. Through the trees came creatures that made Marcus's escort look tame by comparison. They moved wrong, jerky, and unnatural, as if something else wore their bodies like ill-fitting suits. Their eyes held no light, just empty black voids that seemed to drink in the surrounding illumination. Corruption, Marcus realized. These were the enemy touch Scar had warned about. 20 of them emerged from the shadows. Various species, but all sharing that same wrongness. Their movements synchronized perfectly, no individuality remaining in their hijacked forms. They arranged themselves in attack formation, focused entirely on Marcus. Scar stepped forward, placing his massive bulk between Marcus and the corrupted. He spoke in his own language, sounds that Marcus's translator couldn't interpret, but that carried clear meaning. A challenge, a warning, a declaration that they would not pass. The corrupted responded as one, their voices a discordant chorus that made Marcus's teeth ache. The false makers will fall. The true void reclaims its own. Surrender the awakened one. Like hell, Marcus muttered, settling into a shooting stance. What followed wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. But not the kind Marcus expected. Scar moved first, faster than any creature his size had a right to be. His claws, capable of tearing through starship hull plating, struck with surgical precision. Not killing blows, Marcus realized with shock, but severing strikes aimed at specific points on the corrupted creatures' bodies. Where Scar's claws passed, black ichor sprayed, and the wrongness began to fade from his victim's eyes. The other protectors followed their leader's example. They fought not to kill, but to cleanse, targeting whatever infection controlled these creatures. The beetle things pinned, corrupted with their massive bulk, while the runners darted in to make precise strikes. The aerial hunters dove from above, their talons finding nerve clusters with uncanny accuracy. Marcus held his fire, recognizing that his protectors had a plan. Instead, he watched for any corrupted that might break through their lines. His enhanced vision caught details his conscious mind could barely process. Patterns in the black ichor, the way it moved with purpose, trying to find new hosts even as it was expelled from the old. One corrupted, a thing that might once have been a beautiful crystalline spider, broke through the defensive line. It scuttled toward Marcus with terrifying speed, its mandibles dripping with venom that hissed and smoked where it hit the ground. Marcus didn't hesitate. His rifle spoke once, the plasma bolt taking the creature's center mass. But instead of dying, the creature split apart. The black corruption holding it together abandoned the dying host, forming into a writhing mass of pure malevolence that lunged at Marcus. Time slowed as his combat reflexes kicked in. He dove aside, the corruption missing him by centimeters. Where it struck the ground, vegetation withered and died in an expanding circle. Marcus came up rolling, but the corruption was already reforming, preparing for another strike. Then Scar was there, his massive jaws closing around the writhing mass. The Ravager's throat glowed with inner fire as he swallowed the corruption whole. When he opened his mouth again, only ash emerged. "You can digest that stuff?" Marcus asked, incredulous. Scar's response was grave. "Makers built us to fight the void touched. Our bodies remember the old war. But each cleansing costs. Too much, and we become what we fight." The battle was ending. Of the 20 corrupted, 15 now lay cleansed, but unconscious, their bodies slowly healing from whatever the corruption had done to them. 5 had been too far gone, their forms collapsing into ash when the controlling force was removed. The protectors showed signs of fatigue, some sporting wounds that leaked glowing blood. Marcus checked his rifle, 14 shots remaining. One corrupted faced, 19 to go, and they hadn't even covered half the distance to the colony. At this rate, he'd run out of ammunition long before reaching safety. "We need a better strategy," he said, addressing Scar. "This corruption, is it everywhere? How many infected creatures are we talking about?" Scar's multiple eyes dimmed with what Marcus interpreted as worry. Void touch spreads. Start at the star wounds, places where reality grows thin. Now reaches across many territories. Thousands infected, maybe more. Colony nest sits near largest star wound. Marcus's blood ran cold. If the colony was near one of these dimensional weak points, they might already be under siege. Or worse, corrupted themselves. He thought of the 3,000 civilians, the handful of Marines, all unaware of the true danger approaching. How fast can we move, he asked. If we push through the night? Fast brings danger, Scar warned. Night hunters wake. Not all remember Maker bonds. Some never knew them. We'll have to risk it. Those people need warning. Scar studied him with those alien eyes, then made a decision. He turned to the assembled protectors and spoke in rapid, complex tones. The creatures reorganized themselves. The walking wounded moved to the center, while the strongest took perimeter positions. They set off at a pace that pushed Marcus to his limits. Even with his enhanced suit and peak physical conditioning, keeping up with the alien creatures tested him. They moved through the bioluminescent forest like ghosts, following paths that seemed to exist more in genetic memory than physical reality. 3 times they encountered corrupted patrols. 3 times the protectors dealt with them while Marcus conserved his ammunition. He began to see patterns in how the corruption operated. It was intelligent but not creative. It used its host's abilities but couldn't innovate. It was like fighting a virus that could think but not truly reason. As dawn approached, painting the sky with unfamiliar colors, they crested a ridge that gave Marcus his first view of the colony. His heart sank. New Haven looked intact from a distance, its prefab structures and defense towers standing where they should. But there was no movement, no lights, no sign of the constant activity that should mark a human settlement. Worse, between them and the colony lay a killing field. Hundreds of corrupted creatures waited in perfect formation, an army of the Void Touch standing between Marcus and his goal. At their center, something that made his eyes water to look it directly, a tear in reality itself, a star wound bleeding darkness into the world. By the Makers, Scar breathed, and Marcus heard fear in the alien's voice for the first time. The corrupted army turned as one, thousands of empty eyes fixing on their position. They didn't charge, didn't attack. They simply waited, an invitation and a threat combined. They want me to come to them, Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. This is a trap. Yes, Scar agreed. Void knows Maker-born awakened. Wants to corrupt or consume. Either serves its purpose. Marcus studied the tactical situation with eyes trained by decades of warfare. The corrupted held superior numbers and defensive position. His protectors were exhausted from the night's battles. He had 14 plasma shots and whatever tricks the architects might have hidden in human DNA. But behind that army lay 3,000 human lives, people who had come to the stars seeking new beginnings, not ancient wars. People who deserved a chance to know their true heritage and choose their own fate. Tell me about the star wounds, Marcus said, his mind racing. How do they work? What creates them? Scar shifted uncomfortably. Void touched tier reality. Make doorways for the enemy that waits. In old times, Makers sealed such wounds with. He paused, struggling for words, with will made real. With the power to say this shall be and make it true. Marcus felt something stir deep inside him, an echo of the vision from the pillar. The architects hadn't just been advanced aliens with better technology. They had been something more fundamental, beings who could impose their will on reality itself. And if humans were their descendants, I need to get closer, Marcus said, decided. To the wound itself. Madness, Scar protested. Corruption will take you. Maybe. Or maybe it's time to find out if any of the old power remains. Marcus checked his gear one last time, then looked at the assembled protectors. I'm not asking you to follow. You've done more than enough. But those people down there are my pack, my responsibility. I have to try. The creatures exchanged looks he couldn't interpret. Then, one by one, they arranged themselves in assault formation around him. The message was clear. Where the Maker-born went, they would follow. Marcus felt humbled by their loyalty. These beings owed humanity nothing. If anything, humanity owed them for forgetting the bonds that tied them together. Yet here they stood, ready to charge into certain death because genetic memory told them the Makers were worth protecting. "All right," he said, raising his rifle. "Let's remind them why the architects ruled the galaxy." They descended the ridge at a run. No more stealth or caution. The corrupted army waited until they reached optimal killing range, then surged forward in a wave of darkness and twisted flesh. Marcus fired controlled bursts, each plasma bolt dropping a corrupted, but it was like trying to empty an ocean with a spoon. His protectors hit the enemy line with devastating force. Scar tore through corrupted like paper, his claws leaving trails of purifying fire. The beetles formed living tanks, crushing enemies beneath their bulk. The runners danced between larger foes, striking and fading before retaliation could come. But there were too many. For every corrupted that fell, two more took its place. Marcus's rifle clicked empty as he dropped his 14th target. He switched to his sidearm, a traditional projectile weapon that seemed pitifully inadequate against the horde. They were being pushed back, overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Several protectors had fallen, their bodies already being infected by the spreading corruption. Marcus watched in horror as one of the runners, its crystalline fur now shot through with black veins, turned on its former allies. This was how it would end. Not in glory, but in futility. The last awakened human would fall before ever reaching the colony, and with him would die any chance of humanity reclaiming its birthright. Then Marcus felt it, a heat building in his chest, spreading through his limbs like liquid fire. Not painful, but powerful. The vision from the pillar returned, clearer now. He saw the architects as they truly were, not just advanced beings, but forces of creation itself. They had spoken worlds into existence, written the laws that governed life, imposed order on chaos through will alone. And that power, dormant for millennia, awakened in their descendant. Marcus dropped his empty pistol and raised his hand toward the star wound. He didn't know what he was doing, operating on instinct older than human civilization. But he knew what he wanted. He wanted that wound closed. He wanted the corruption cleansed. He wanted his people safe. "No," he said, and the word carried more than sound. Reality rippled. The corrupted nearest to him simply ceased, not dying but unmaking, their borrowed existence revoked. The star wound flickered, its edges beginning to fray as something fought to hold it closed. But Marcus was only one man, newly awakened, trying to channel power meant for beings who had thought in geological time. The strain was enormous. He felt his body beginning to fail, cells burning out from energies they weren't designed to contain. Blood ran from his nose, his ears. His vision blurred. Still, he held on. Each second bought his protectors time to fight. Each moment the wound remained unstable prevented more corruption from entering the world. If he could just last a little longer. Through the haze of pain and power, Marcus saw them. Humans, Marines in power armor, pouring from the colony's gates. They had seen the battle, seen the impossible stand made by one of their own. And they had come. Plasma fire and railgun rounds tore into the corrupted ranks from a new direction. The colony's defense turrets, finally, online, added their heavier weapons to the assault. But, more importantly, as the Marines drew closer, Marcus felt something else. They were awakening too. Not fully, not like his violent awakening at the pillar. But proximity to an active architect descendant was triggering dormant genetics. One Marine's shots began to burn with more than plasma, each impact purifying corruption in expanding circles. Another seemed to be everywhere at once, moving with speed that defied physics. Together, Marcus gasped, reaching out with senses he didn't fully understand. We were never meant to stand alone. The Marines heard him, not with their ears, but with the part of them that remembered. Without training or explanation, they began to pool their awakening power. 50 humans, most unaware of their heritage moments ago, stood as one against the void. The star wound shrieked, a sound that existed in dimensions humans had no words for. It began to collapse, its edges eaten away by the combined will of the Maker's descendants. The corrupted army wavered, their controlling intelligence severed from its source. With a final pulse of defiance, the wound closed. The immediate silence was deafening. Where thousands of corrupted had stood, only freed creatures remained, confused and wounded but alive. The star wound left only a circular scar on the ground, grass already beginning to grow over the damaged earth. Marcus collapsed, his body finally giving out from the strain. Strong hands caught him, Scar somehow still standing despite dozens of wounds. Around them, Marines and alien protectors stood side by side, united by a battle that had reforged bonds forgotten for eons. "Sir," one of the Marines, a young woman whose eyes now held flecks of golden light, knelt beside him. "What the hell just happened?" Marcus managed a weak smile. "The beginning, Corporal. Just the beginning." He passed out then, his duty done for the moment. But across the galaxy, other humans felt the ripple of what had happened on Kepler 442b. Dreams turned to visions. Visions became understanding. Understanding led to awakening. The Makers were returning. The old enemy had revealed itself too soon, acting before humanity was ready. Now it would face not scattered colonies of a young species, but the awakening might of the Architect's heirs. The real war was about to begin. Marcus woke to the sound of heated argument. His body ached in ways that suggested he'd pushed far beyond normal human limits, but he was alive. The medical bay's sterile smell mixed with something else. Ozone and burnt copper, the scent of expended Architect power. Can't just accept that aliens are bowing to us because of some ancient genetic memory. Governor Patricia Wells's voice carried through the thin walls. "This changes everything. Earth needs to be informed immediately. With respect, Governor, Earth wouldn't believe us without proof." That was Colonel Harrison, the Marine commander. I barely believe it, and I was there. I felt it happen." Marcus forced himself upright, ignoring the protest of overworked muscles, and dripped fluids into his arm, and monitoring equipment showed vitals that should have had him in intensive care. Instead, he felt strangely energized, as if the power he'd channeled had left changes behind. The door opened, and a Marine medic entered, the same young woman who'd knelt beside him after the battle. Her eyes widened when she saw him awake. "Sir, you should be resting. Your cellular structure showed signs of—" "I'm fine, Corporal." Marcus glanced at her name tag. Chun. Same surname. Coincidence? She shook her head, those gold-flecked eyes meeting his. "Maybe not, sir. Since the awakening, I've been remembering things. Dreams that feel like memories. Ancient places, impossible wars." She paused, clearly struggling with the implications. "My grandmother used to tell stories about our family being descended from Starwalkers. I always thought it was just folklore. Maybe all folklore has truth at its core," Marcus suggested, carefully removing the "for." "How many others are experiencing changes?" "All of them, sir. Every human in the colony, and reports are coming in from other worlds. It's like," she searched for words, "like your awakening sent out a signal. Humans everywhere are starting to remember." Marcus absorbed this, his tactical mind already working through implications. If humanity was awakening across all colonized space, it would cause chaos. Governments would panic. Religions would need to reconcile with humanity's true origins. And somewhere out there, the enemy that corrupted worlds was likely preparing its response. "I need to speak with the governor," he said, standing despite Chen's protests. His body responded better than expected, movements flowing with new grace. The conference room was crowded. Governor Wells sat at the head of the table, her normally perfectly styled hair disheveled from stress. Colonel Harrison stood near a wall display showing tactical data. Around them, colony leadership argued in increasingly heated tones. Most surprisingly, Scar was there, his massive form somehow squeezed into the human-sized space. Several other alien protectors waited outside, visible through the transparent walls. The integration had begun, whether humanity was ready or not. "Mr. Chun," Governor Wells said as Marcus entered. "Good. Maybe you can explain what's happening to my colony, to our entire species. Marcus took an offered seat, grateful when Corporal Chan appeared with water and a protein bar. He organized his thoughts, then began with the crash landing and everything that followed. The room fell silent as he spoke, even the skeptics subdued by the weight of his words. When he finished, Governor Wells leaned back, aging years and moments. So we're not human. We're descendants of these architects who created life throughout the galaxy, then chose to forget. And now some ancient enemy is returning. We're still human, Marcus corrected gently. Humanity is what we became, but we're also more. The architects built safeguards into every species they created, including themselves. When the enemy returned, those safeguards activated. The bowing, Colonel Harrison said, understanding dawning. These creatures recognize us as their creator's descendants. Scar spoke for the first time, his translator rendering complex thoughts into simple words. Not just recognize. Remember, every Maker-touched species carries the knowing. When Makers fell asleep, we continued the watch. Now Makers wake, and we serve as was ordained. How many species are we talking about? Wells asked. Thousands, Scar replied. Across hundreds of worlds, all waiting for Makers to remember their purpose. The room erupted again, voices raised in denial, acceptance, fear, and wonder. Marcus let them process, his attention drawn to the tactical display. Red markers showed locations of confirmed star wounds across human space. Too many, spreading in a pattern that suggested intelligence behind their placement. Governor, he interrupted, we need to focus on immediate threats. The enemy isn't waiting for us to adapt. How many star wounds have been detected in this system? Harrison pulled up the data. 7 confirmed, 12 probable. Most are small, but there's a massive one forming near the gas giant's third moon. If it fully opens, it won't. Marcus said with certainty he didn't fully understand. We won't let it. You nearly died closing one wound. Chen pointed out from where she stood by the door. How can we handle dozens? Marcus looked around the room, seeing the fear and uncertainty in their faces. These were colonists, not soldiers. They had come to the stars seeking new lives, not ancient wars. But they were also human, descendants of beings who had shaped galaxies. That had to count for something. Alone, we can't, he admitted. But we're not alone. Every human who awakens adds to our collective strength. Every species that remembers their bonds with us brings knowledge and abilities we've forgotten. We don't have to face this as scattered individuals. You're talking about uniting humanity, Wells said slowly. Not just politically, but spiritually, psychically. I'm talking about remembering what we were designed to be. Marcus turned to Scar. In the old times, how did the architects fight the enemy? Scar's eyes gleamed with ancestral memory. As one mind with many bodies, as will given form. Maker spoke, and reality obeyed. But required unity. Required purpose shared by all. The colonial governments will never agree, someone protested. Earth's federal system can barely manage trade disputes. You're asking for unprecedented cooperation. I'm not asking, Marcus said quietly. None of us are. The awakening has begun. Humans across the galaxy are remembering, changing, evolving. Governments can either lead that change or be swept aside by it. His words carried weight beyond their simple meaning. Several people in the room swayed, caught by echoes of architect authority. The power was growing stronger, more natural with each use. Dangerous, perhaps, but necessary. A calm unit chimed. Harrison answered, his face paling as he listened. Sir, you need to hear this. He activated the room's speakers. A panicked voice filled the air. Under attack. Repeat, Osiris Station is under attack. Creatures coming through dimensional rifts, hundreds of them. Our weapons barely slow them down. Any human forces, please, static consumed the signal. Osiris Station was 3 systems away, a major transit hub connecting dozen colonial worlds. If it fell, how fast can we get there? Marcus asked. Our fastest courier ship could make it in 18 hours, Wells replied. But what can one ship do against it's not about the ship, Marcus interrupted. It's about gathering awakened humans. Everyone we bring multiplies our strength. He turned to the assembled leaders. Who's with me? The response was immediate. Colonel Harrison stepped forward. My Marines go where you go, sir. Corporal Chin nodded agreement, her hand moving to her sidearm with newfound confidence. Others followed, fear replaced by determination. This is insane, Wells breathed, but she too stood. I'm too old for battlefield heroics, but I can coordinate from here. Rally other colonies, spread the word about what's happening. Marcus felt pride swell in his chest. This was humanity at its best. Faced with the impossible, they chose to fight rather than surrender. Maybe they weren't ready to be architects again, but they were ready to try. Scar, he addressed the Ravager. Will your people come with us? Makerborn leads, we follow. But more than Ravagers answer the call. Scar gestured beyond the walls where more creatures gathered. Word spreads through the wild spaces. The Great Alliance reforms. Species remember their purpose. Within an hour, the colony's courier ship was prepared for departure. It was a small vessel, designed for speed over firepower, but it would serve their purpose. 50 awakened humans boarded, along with a dozen alien protectors who could fit in a modified cargo bay. As the ship lifted off, Marcus stood in the cockpit watching New Haven shrink below. The colony looked vulnerable from above, a small bubble of human civilization on an alien world. But it no longer stood alone. Even now, he could sense other protector species converging on human settlements, drawn by genetic imperatives to defend the Maker's descendants. Jump coordinates locked in, the pilot announced. Osiris station in 17 hours, 40 minutes. Best speed, Marcus ordered, settling into the command chair Harrison had yielded to him. No one questioned his authority, despite his lack of official rank. The awakening had changed social dynamics in ways they were only beginning to understand. Corporal Chun approached with a tactical pad. Sir, I've been analyzing the star wound patterns. There's something you should see. Marcus studied the data, his enhanced perception catching patterns baseline humans would miss. The wounds weren't random. They formed geometric designs across space, preparing for something larger. They're building a gateway, he realized. These wounds are just the beginning. They're weakening reality across multiple systems to bring something through. Something big. The enemy that waits, Scar rumbled from where he crouched. In the old war, it tried the same. Maker stopped it then, sealed it beyond the void. Now it tries again. How long do we have? Chun ran calculations, her movements faster and more precise than normal human limits. If the pattern holds, maybe 6 weeks before they can open a gateway large enough for whatever's waiting on the other side. 6 weeks to unite humanity, awaken their dormant powers, and forge alliances with thousands of species. 6 weeks to prepare for a war older than recorded history. It seemed impossible, but then Marcus reflected, humanity had always specialized in the impossible. They had gone from caves to stars in a cosmic eye blink. They had survived disasters that should have ended them. Now they faced their greatest challenge, and he found himself almost eager to see how they would rise to meet it. Send a message to every human world. He ordered, tell them what's happening. Tell them about the awakening, the enemy, all of it. Some won't believe, but enough will. And send this specifically. Any human experiencing changes, dreams, or new abilities should gather at designated safe zones. We need to train to understand what we're becoming. You think people will actually come? Harrison asked. They'll come, Marcus said with certainty. They'll feel the pull just like I did. The architects built us to unite in crisis. It's in our DNA. The ship entered hyperspace, reality blurring around them as they raced toward Osiris Station. Marcus closed his eyes, reaching out with senses that didn't exist in normal human anatomy. He could feel them, thousands of awakening humans, confused and frightened but determined. He could sense the protector species mobilizing, ancient alliances reactivating. And beneath it all, like a bass note in reality's symphony, he felt the enemy's presence, vast, patient, and filled with hunger for a universe remade in its image. It had waited eons for the architects to weaken, for their descendants to forget their purpose. But it had waited too long. Humanity was remembering. The makers were returning. When Marcus opened his eyes, golden light flickered in their depths. Around him, his makeshift crew showed similar signs of change. They were becoming something new, something old, something necessary. The real test would come at Osiris Station. If they could hold there, prove that awakened humans could stand against the void touched, it would inspire others. If they failed, humanity might lose hope before the war truly began. "Sir," the pilot called out, picking up distress signals from 3 other systems. "The attacks are spreading." Marcus stood, feeling the weight of command but also its rightness. "Note their locations. After Osiris, we'll need to move fast. This enemy made a mistake attacking before we were fully awakened. Now we know what's coming." He looked at the assembled humans and aliens, seeing not a desperate rescue mission, but the first unit of a reformed alliance. They want to break us before we remember our strength. Instead, they've given us the catalyst we needed. The ship dove deeper into hyperspace, carrying humanity's hope toward the besieged station. Behind them, on 100 worlds, humans woke from dreams of impossible cities and galactic wars, knowing their ordinary lives had ended. The descendants of the architects were going to war, and this time they would remember why their ancestors had been feared across the cosmos. Time was short, the enemy was vast, and humanity was still fragmented. But Marcus had seen what united humans could do. He had felt the power sleeping in their genes. The void touched had no idea what they had awakened. The makers were returning, and the galaxy would never be the same. Osiris Station hung in space like a wounded metal beast, its hull scarred by dimensional tears and energy weapons. Marcus studied the tactical display as their courier ship dropped out of hyperspace, his enhanced senses immediately cataloging the chaos before them. The station, designed to house 50,000 civilians and serve as a trade nexus, was under siege. Star wounds opened and closed around it like hungry mouths, disgorging corrupted creatures into the void. Some alien species could survive in vacuum, and these had been turned into living weapons. They swarmed the station's exterior, tearing at hull plates while point defense systems fired desperately. "Mother of God," Harrison whispered. "There must be thousands of them." 17,300, Chin supplied, her awakened mind processing data at superhuman speeds. "But look at the defense pattern. Someone's still fighting smart in there." She was right. The station's weapons fired in coordinated bursts, creating overlapping fields of fire that maximized damage while conserving ammunition. Emergency bulkheads had been strategically sealed, funneling attackers into kill zones. Whoever commanded the defense knew their business. "Incoming transmission," the pilot announced. A haggard face appeared on the main screen. Admiral Sarah Chun, no relation to the corporal despite the shared surname. Her uniform was torn, dried blood crusted on her forehead, but her eyes burned with determination. "Unknown vessel, stay clear. We're preparing to overload the reactor. Better to deny them the station than..." She stopped, staring at Marcus. "Wait, you're human, but you're different. I can feel it." "Admiral Chun, I'm Marcus Chun, Navy SEAL. We're here to help. Do not overload that reactor." 50 humans against 17,000 corrupted? The Admiral laughed bitterly. "I appreciate the gesture, but not just humans," Marcus interrupted. He gestured, and Scar moved into view. The Admiral's eyes widened as more protector species became visible. "And not just any humans. We're awakened, Admiral. We remember what we were meant to be." On the tactical display, Marcus could see the moment understanding hit the Admiral. Her expression shifted from despair to desperate hope. The dreams, the visions, they're real. Real as the enemy attacking your station. "How many humans aboard?" 30,000 civilians, 5,000 military. Most are experiencing changes, but without understanding, without control, it's chaos. Marcus made a decision that would have seemed insane days ago. Now it felt natural as breathing. "Admiral, I need you to gather every human experiencing awakening symptoms. Bring them to your largest open space, a cargo bay, promenade, anywhere they can assembly. Why? Because together, we're going to remind the universe why the architects ruled for millions of years. The Admiral stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. Give us 10 minutes. Marcus turned to his team. We're going hot. Pilot, bring us to the nearest docking port. Marines, prepare for EVA combat. Our alien friends will handle the external threats while we get inside. Sir, Chin spoke up. I'm reading massive energy buildup from the largest star wound. Something's preparing to come through. Something big. Marcus felt it too, a pressure against reality itself. The enemy wasn't just sending corrupted slaves anymore. Something with real power was approaching, testing the boundaries between dimensions. All the more reason to hurry, he said. Scar, can your people clear us a path? The Ravager's predator grin would have been terrifying if it weren't directed at their enemies. Maker's command, we obey. Void touched will remember why they once fled at our approach. The next few minutes blurred together in controlled chaos. The courier ship dove toward the station while protector species launched themselves into the void. Marcus watched in awe as creatures he'd thought bound by biology defied physics itself. Ravagers bounded across empty space, their claws tearing through corrupted with each leap. Crystal runners generated their own atmosphere bubbles, moving like shooting stars through enemy formations. Vacuum combat was supposed to be slow, methodical. This was anything but. It was primal fury given direction, genetic programming activated after eons of dormancy. The protectors carved a path through the corrupted swarm with brutal efficiency. Docking in 30 seconds, the pilot announced, sweat beading his forehead as he navigated the chaotic battlefield. Marcus led his Marines to the airlock, their awakened bodies already adapting to what was coming. He could feel the changes accelerating in proximity to danger. Muscles becoming denser, reflexes sharpening beyond human norms, minds expanding to process battlefield data in ways no baseline human could match. The ship shuddered as it hard-docked with the station. Marcus was first through the airlock, his rifle up and scanning. The corridor beyond was a charnel house. Bodies lay twisted in death, both human and alien. But among the carnage, survivors fought on. A squad of station security held a defensive position at a corridor junction, their weapons running low on charge. Beyond them, corrupted creatures pressed forward in waves. The defenders were seconds from being overrun. Marcus didn't think. He acted. Power flowed through him like lightning, directed by will alone. The corrupted nearest to the defenders simply ceased, their stolen existence revoked by architect authority. The others faltered, their hive-mind connection disrupted by the loss of so many nodes at once. Marines advanced, Harrison commanded, and 50 awakened humans flowed into the corridor like death itself. They fought differently now. Where normal humans would have relied purely on weapons and tactics, the awakened blended physical combat with reality manipulation. One Marine gestured, and gravity reversed in a section of corridor, sending corrupted tumbling. Another touched a bulkhead, and the metal reshaped itself into spears that impaled attacking creatures. The station security stared in shock as their rescuers carved through enemies that had seemed unstoppable moments before. Marcus reached their position, helping their wounded leader to his feet. Where's the Admiral? Central Promenade, the man gasped. Level 40. She's gathering everyone, like you asked. But the corrupted are trying to break through. Harrison, take half our people and secure the route. Chun, you're with me. The rest of you spread out and link up with surviving defense positions. Show them what awakened humans can do. They split up, each group moving with purpose through the station's corridors. Marcus felt the weight of command, but also its necessity. Someone had to lead, to show humanity what they were becoming. He had been chosen by circumstance and genetics, but he would not fail those depending on him. The route to the Central Promenade was a running battle. Corrupted poured from maintenance shafts and emergency accesses, their coordination suggesting intelligent direction. Whatever commanded them knew the Awakened were aboard and was throwing everything at them. But it wasn't enough. Each human who witnessed the Awakened in action felt their own changes accelerate. Station personnel who moments before had been ordinary civilians found themselves moving faster, hitting harder, thinking clearer. The awakening spread like wildfire, jump-started by proximity to those further along in the process. They reached the promenade to find a sight that took Marcus's breath away. 20,000 humans had gathered, filling the massive space. Many showed obvious signs of change. Eyes that glowed with inner light, hair that moved without wind, skin that occasionally flickered with energy patterns. But they were scattered, unfocused, their power wild and undirected. At the center, Admiral Chun stood on an improvised platform. She had organized the Awakened into rough groups, but without understanding of what they were becoming, she could only do so much. "Admiral," Marcus called out, pushing through the crowd. She turned, relief flooding her face. "Thank God. They're trying to break through emergency bulkheads on levels 38 and 42. We've lost contact with." The station shuddered. Not from impact, but from something far worse. Reality itself groaned as the massive star wound finally tore open. Through the promenade's viewports, they could see it, a hole in existence itself, bleeding darkness and impossible geometries into normal space. And through that wound came the enemy. It defied description, existing in too many dimensions for human eyes to properly process. Parts of it seemed mechanical, parts organic, parts pure energy. It was wrong on a fundamental level, a thing that should not be. Where it touched normal space, matter began to corrupt and twist. Panic rippled through the crowd. 20,000 humans, newly awakened to powers they didn't understand, faced with a horror beyond comprehension. In moments, their fear could turn around. Marcus knew he had seconds to act. He leaped onto the platform beside Admiral Chun, drawing on every ounce of command presence he'd developed over 20 years of service. But when he spoke, it was with more than human authority. "Listen to me." The words carried power, resonating in dimensions beyond the physical. Every human in the promenade turned to him, their nascent abilities recognizing the voice of an awakened architect descendant. "I know you're afraid. I know this seems impossible, but you are more than you were. You are the children of beings who shaped galaxies, who wrote the laws of physics, who created life itself. That thing out there, your ancestors fought its kind and won. And you will too." He raised his hand, golden light blazing from his palm. "Feel what you're becoming. Don't fight it. Don't fear it. Embrace it. You are human, but you are also heir to the architects. And together, united in purpose, we are unstoppable." The response was immediate. Light began to bloom throughout the crowd as humans stopped resisting their changes. The promenade filled with a golden radiance as 20,000 descendants of the architects accepted their birthright. "Admiral," Marcus turned to Chun. "You've been organizing them. Can you link them? Create a network." She nodded, understanding flooding her features. Like the old fleet maneuvers, but with minds instead of ships. She closed her eyes, reaching out with newfound senses. "Everyone focus on me. Share your strength. Become one." It shouldn't have worked. 20,000 individuals, most barely awakened, trying to merge consciousness without training or experience. But the architects had built safeguards into their descendants. Under threat, facing extinction, humanity's true nature emerged. The link formed like a stellar ignition. Suddenly, Marcus wasn't just himself, but part of something vast. 20,000 minds touched, shared, united. Individual weakness became collective strength. Fear transformed into determination. Through the station's sensors, now accessible to their linked consciousness, they perceived the enemy entity in its full horror. It was ancient beyond measure, a thing from before the universe settled into its current laws. It hungered for chaos, for reality remade in its image. But it had made a mistake. It had expected to face scattered, confused humans, not the awakened might of the architect's heirs. Together, Marcus spoke, but his voice carried the will of thousands. "We reject you." Power blazed from the station, not just energy, but conceptual force. 20,000 humans spoke with one voice, declaring that the enemy did not belong in their reality. Space itself responded to their combined will. The entity reeled, parts of it unable to maintain coherence against the unified rejection. It lashed out, tendrils of corruption reaching for the station, but they met a barrier of pure determination. Where the entity touched the barrier, it began to dissolve. This was what the architects had been, not just advanced aliens, but beings who could impose their will on existence itself. And their descendants, united in purpose, retained that power. But the entity was strong, fed by eons of consumed realities. It pressed forward, trying to overwhelm them through sheer mass. Cracks appeared in the barrier as humans began to falter, the strain of maintaining such power overwhelming newly awakened minds. Then, the protectors arrived. Scar and his kin had cleared the station's exterior of corrupted. Now they added their strength to the battle, not through architect power, but through the bonds forged eons ago. Every species touched by the Makers remembered their purpose, their place in the great design. The barrier solidified, reinforced by millions of years of genetic programming. Ravagers, crystal runners, armor beetles, aerial hunters. Dozens of species stood as one, protecting the Maker's descendants as they had been created to do. The entity found itself not facing one species, but an alliance that spanned the galaxy. It had expected division, had counted on the architect's children forgetting their bonds with created life. Instead, it faced the very unity that had defeated it before. With a sound like reality tearing, the entity began to retreat. It pulled back through the star wound, wounded but not destroyed. As it fled, the wound began to close, sealed by combined human will and protector dedication. But Marcus, still linked to thousands of minds, saw the truth. This was just one entity, one attack. Across the galaxy, more wounds opened, more entities tested humanity's defenses. The war had only begun. The link dissolved slowly, humans returning to individual consciousness, but forever changed by the experience. They had felt true unity, understood their purpose in the grand design. There would be no going back to what they had been. Admiral Chun sagged against the platform railing, exhausted but triumphant. Did we actually drive that thing off? We did, Marcus confirmed, helping steady her. But it'll be back with others of its kind. This was a probe, testing our defenses. Then we'd better be ready. The Admiral straightened, steel entering her voice. If humanity's awakening, we need to do it right. Training, organization, alliance building with these protector species. Marcus nodded, but his attention was drawn to the viewports. Outside, more ships were arriving. Human vessels, but also alien craft he didn't recognize. The battle had been observed. The awakening had been witnessed. Corporal Chan appeared at his elbow, her face grave despite their victory. "Sir, we're receiving hundreds of transmission. Every human colony, every alien species that remembers the architects. They all want to know what happens next. What happened next would determine the fate of the galaxy. Humanity had awakened, but they were still children trying to fill their parents' shoes. The enemy was vast, patient, and utterly hostile to ordered reality. And somewhere in the void between stars, worse things than entities waited for their chance to unmake creation. But Marcus looked at the humans around him, saw the determination in their glowing eyes, felt the bonds reforming with protector species. They had advantages the original architects hadn't possessed. They had grown up fighting, surviving, adapting. They knew struggle in ways their predecessors, born to power, never had. "What happens next," he said, loud enough for all to hear, "is we prepare for war. Not as humans alone, but as heirs to the architects and allies to all they created. The enemy thought us weak, divided, forgotten. They're about to learn otherwise." Cheers rose from 20,000 throats, but Marcus was already thinking ahead. They needed to reach Earth, to awaken the billions still sleeping. They needed to forge proper alliances with protector species to understand the full extent of architect technology locked in their genes. They needed to find other descendants. Surely humanity wasn't the only species the architects had become. The real work was just beginning. But for the first time since that crash landing on Kepler 442b, Marcus felt hope. Humanity was remembering. The Makers were returning, and the universe would tremble at their waking. 6 weeks. That's all the time Marcus had estimated before the enemy could open a gateway large enough to bring their true forces through. 6 weeks that had transformed humanity more radically than the previous 1,000 years combined. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity Station, watching Earth turn slowly below. The planet looked different now. Threads of golden light connected major cities, visible manifestations of the awakening network that linked billions of human minds. Similar networks existed on every human world, creating a web of consciousness that spanned the galaxy. The latest numbers are in, Admiral Chen reported, joining him at the viewport. She had become his second-in-command, her organizational skills invaluable in coordinating the rapid changes. 73% of humanity has undergone at least partial awakening. The remainder are either resistant or require direct intervention. And our allies? 17,000 species have answered the call. Everything from microscopic organisms to living mountains. The architects apparently didn't do anything by half measures. Marcus smiled at that. In 6 weeks, they had discovered more about their predecessors than in all of human history. The architects hadn't just been powerful. They had been gardeners on a galactic scale, creating interconnected ecosystems designed to support and defend each other. Every species had a role, a purpose in the grand design. Sir, Corporal Chin approached, her appearance radically changed from 6 weeks ago. Her hair now held threads of living light, and her eyes showed depths that seemed to extend beyond physical space. Like many of the first awakened, her transformation had been profound. The Council is ready for you. The Council, another radical change. No longer did individual governments rule human worlds. The awakening had created something new, a collective leadership that could act with unity while respecting individual freedom. It wasn't perfect, but it was necessary. Marcus entered the council chamber to find representatives from across human space, along with speakers from major protector species. At the center of the room hung a hologram of the galaxy, marked with thousands of red points, confirmed star wounds, each a potential invasion point. The situation, Marcus began without preamble, is both better and worse than we imagined. Better, because our awakening has proceeded faster than anticipated. Worse, because the enemy has accelerated their timeline in response. He gestured, and the hologram zoomed in on a section near the galactic core. 3 hours ago, our deep space monitors detected this. The image showed a wound in space that dwarfed any they had seen before. Not a tear, but a chasm, bleeding unreality into the cosmos. And through it, shapes moved. Massive things that hurt to perceive, even through heavily filtered sensors. They're not waiting 6 weeks, Harrison said from his position. The colonel had become humanity's military coordinator, his tactical brilliance enhanced by awakening. They're coming now. How long? Someone asked. 18 hours until the first wave reaches inhabited systems, Chen supplied. The energy readings suggest millions of entities, plus at least a dozen of the greater horrors like what we faced at Osiris. The chamber fell silent. They had come so far, achieved so much, but millions of entities? Even awakened, even allied with protector species, the numbers were daunting. There's more, Marcus continued. Our archaeologist teams have discovered something in the architect ruins on Kepler 442b. Something our predecessors left for us. A new image appeared. A massive structure hidden beneath the planet's surface, revealed by deep scanning. It resembled a flower made of impossible metals, each petal inscribed with equations that describe the fundamental forces of reality. It's a weapon, Dr. Elizabeth Wong explained. The theoretical physicist had been among the first to fully awaken, her understanding of universe's hidden laws making her invaluable. Not a weapon that destroys, but one that reinforces. The architects called it the reality anchor. What does it do? Wells asked. The governor had taken to awakening poorly, aging rapidly from a strain, but her administrative skills remained sharp. It stabilizes local space-time, Wong explained. Makes it impossible for star wounds to form, for entities to manifest. But there's a catch. It requires massive amounts of power, not electrical or nuclear, but will. The focused determination of awakened minds. How many minds? Marcus asked, though he suspected the answer. All of them. Every awakened human, focused through a single conduit. Wong looked directly at him. Through you, specifically. The architects built it to recognize their direct descendants. And your awakening is the most complete. The weight of it settled on Marcus's shoulders. Not just leading humanity's defense, but becoming the focal point for billions of minds. The strain could destroy him, scatter his consciousness across dimensions. When I first woke up on Kepler 442b, he said slowly, I was just a soldier. Lost, alone, trying to survive. Then, I discovered we were more than we knew. That we had a legacy, a purpose written into our genes. He looked around the chamber, meeting eyes both human and alien. I won't pretend I'm not afraid, but I know what happens if we don't try. The enemy doesn't just want to conquer. It wants to unmake everything the architects built, return the universe to primordial chaos. Scar rumbled from where he crouched, too large for the human-sized chairs. Makerborn speaks truth. We have waited generations for makers to return. Now you have. We stand with you, as was ordained. Then, we have work to do, Marcus decided. Admiral, coordinate the evacuation of non-awakened humans to safe zones. Colonel, deploy our forces to delay the enemy advance. We need to buy time to reach Kepler 442b and activate the anchor. What about Earth? Someone asked. The homeworld will be defenseless if we concentrate our forces elsewhere. Marcus smiled grimly. Earth won't be defenseless. Watch. He closed his eyes, reaching out through the awakening network. Billions of human minds touched his, sharing their strength. Through them, he spoke to Earth itself, to the biosphere the architects had secretly modified millennia ago. The planet responded. On the hologram, Earth began to change. The threads of light intensified, spreading beyond cities into wilderness. Forests awakened, their root networks becoming neural pathways. Oceans resonated with purpose. Even the atmosphere itself began to shimmer with protective energy. The architects didn't just hide among us, Marcus explained to the stun chamber. They hid defenses in our world, dormant until needed. Earth is awakening too, becoming what it was always meant to be, a fortress world, the last bastion if all else fails. The revelation rippled through the chamber. Humanity's homeworld, the cradle of their species, was itself a creation of the architects. It put their entire history in a new light. Sir, a technician interrupted. Priority message from the frontier. The enemy has begun their assault. The hologram shifted to show the outer colonies. Star wounds opened in sequence, disgorging waves of corrupted creatures and formless entities. Colonial defenses, even enhanced by awakened humans, began to buckle under the assault. So it begins, Marcus said. All units, implement Omega Protocol. We make our stand at Kepler 442b. The next hours blurred together in controlled chaos. Fleets gathered from across human space, joined by massive bioships of the protector species. The evacuation of vulnerable populations proceeded with desperate efficiency. And, through it all, the awakening network blazed brighter as humanity prepared for the fight of its existence. Marcus found himself aboard the flagship Resurrection, a battleship that had been radically modified with hybrid human protector technology. Its weapons could fire concentrated will as easily as plasma. Its shields existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Jump coordinates locked, the navigator announced. Around them, Hundreds of ships prepared for simultaneous transit. All ships, Marcus broadcast, his voice carrying across the fleet. We go to reclaim our birthright. We go to activate the anchor. We go to show the enemy why the architects ruled for millions of years. Jump! Space twisted, and the fleet translated across the galaxy in a heartbeat. They emerged in the Kepler system to find it already under assault. The enemy had anticipated their move, sending advanced forces to secure the anchor. The space around Kepler, 442b, was a nightmare of combat. Corrupted bioships grappled with protector vessels. Human destroyers danced through fields of reality distortion, their awakened crews allowing them to navigate impossible conditions. And, at the center of it all, a massive entity tried to tear open a permanent wound directly above the anchor site. All ships engage. Harrison commanded from the tactical center. Buy us a path to the surface. The battle was unlike anything in human military history. Ships didn't just exchange fire. They imposed competing versions of reality on each other. A human frigate gestured, and enemy vessels forgot how to exist. A corrupted dreadnought retaliated by trying to age its opponents into dust. Marcus felt every death through the network. Each awakened human who fell diminished the whole. But they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that failure meant the end of everything they knew. "Sir, landing zone secured," the pilot announced. Marcus led the ground team himself, a mixture of the most powerfully awakened humans and elite protector warriors. They dropped through atmosphere wreathed in golden fire, their combined will burning away corrupted creatures that tried to intercept. The anchor site was a war zone. Enemy forces had surrounded the excavated structure, pouring corruption into its mechanisms. The reality anchor fought back, its automated defenses older than human civilization, but it was losing. "Form a circle," Marcus commanded. 100 awakened humans created a perimeter, their combined will manifesting as a dome of golden energy. Inside, Marcus and his tech team raced for the anchor's control center, fighting through corrupted creatures with desperate efficiency. The control center was a sphere of crystallized space-time, its surface covered in equations that rewrote themselves based on the observer. At its heart waited an interface that looked disturbingly like a human neural implant scaled up thousandfold. "This is it," Wong confirmed, her hands dancing over instruments that shouldn't exist. But Marcus, the power requirements, channeling the entire awakened population through your mind, it could burn out your consciousness entirely. "Then, I burn," Marcus said simply. "Open the connection." Wong hesitated, then began the activation sequence. Around the anchor, ancient mechanisms stirred to life. The structure began to pulse with energy drawn from dimensions humanity had only theorized about. Above, the battle reached apocalyptic proportions. The entity, trying to open the permanent wound, had been joined by others, massive things that violated sanity by their mere presence. The fleet was being pushed back, overwhelmed by sheer numbers despite their awakened advantages. "Connection established," Wong announced, "linking you to the network in 3, 2. The pain was indescribable. Billions of minds suddenly flowed through Marcus, each carrying their own thoughts, fears, hopes. He felt himself fragmenting, individuality dissolving under the torrent of consciousness. But then training kicked in. 20 years of discipline, of maintaining focus under impossible conditions. Marcus held to his sense of self, became a lens through which humanity's will could focus. The anchor responded. Its petals began to unfold, each 1 kilometer long, inscribed with the fundamental laws that governed reality. Power blazed through the structure, not destroying but defining, declaring what was and wasn't possible in local space. The effect was immediate. Star wounds began to close, sealed by inexorable law. Corrupted creatures found themselves unable to maintain coherence, their stolen existence revoked. The entities themselves, vast as they were, began to fray at the edges. But they fought back. The largest entity, the one that had fled from Osiris Station, dove directly at the planet. It would destroy the anchor even if it meant its own dissolution. Marcus felt the network's fear, billions of humans seeing death approaching. But he also felt their determination, their refusal to surrender. And in that moment, he understood what the architect had truly been. Not gods, not perfect beings, but guardians who understood that reality itself needed protection from the forces that would unmake it, and that guardianship had passed to their descendants. Together, Marcus spoke with the voice of humanity. We are the makers. We are the guardians. And you shall not pass. Power blazed from the anchor, but also from every awakened human in the system. From the protector species who remembered their purpose. Even from Earth, impossibly distant, adding its strength across the light years. The descending entity met a barrier not of energy, but of pure determination. The combined will of trillions of lives, united in purpose, standing against the void. For a moment, the two forces balanced, order against chaos, existence against entropy. Then, the entity broke. It came apart like a nightmare at dawn, its fundamental impossibility unable to persist against such unified rejection. The other entities, seeing their greatest member fall, began to retreat through the remaining wounds. Don't let them escape, Harrison commanded. Seal everything. The anchor pulsed brighter, its influence expanding beyond the planet, beyond the system. Everywhere its light touched, reality reasserted itself. Star wounds sealed permanently. Corruption burned away. The invasion routes the enemy had spent eons preparing were closed in moments. Marcus felt the network changing, crystallizing into something permanent. Humanity wasn't just awakened now. They were transformed. The temporary unity was becoming a lasting connection, not overriding individuality, but enhancing it. They were becoming what the architects had been, but shaped by human experience and values. Marcus, Wang's voice seemed to come from far away. You need to disconnect. The strain, not yet, he managed. One more thing. Through the anchor, through the network, Marcus reached out to the fleeing entities. Not with aggression, but with communication. They needed to understand. Hear me, he spoke across dimensions. You lost here. You lost because you forgot that chaos needs order to define itself, that destruction requires creation to have meaning. The architects understood this. Their descendants understand it. Return to your realm. Tend your own reality. This one is protected. For a moment, he felt alien acknowledgement. Not agreement, never that, but understanding. The entities withdrew, not just from human space, but from the galaxy itself. They would return someday. Such was their nature. But it would be centuries, perhaps millennia, before they could mount another assault. Marcus finally released the connection. He collapsed, his body racked by the strain of channeling so much power. But he lived, held together by the network he had helped forge. Is it over? Someone asked. The invasion is, Marcus confirmed weakly. But not our work. Never that. He was right. In the days that followed, as humanity celebrated their victory and mourned their losses, the true scope of their transformation became clear. They weren't just human anymore. They were architects, inheritors of a legacy that spanned the cosmos. And with that inheritance came responsibility. Protector species needed guidance to find new purposes beyond ancient programming. Star systems required healing from the damage of star wounds. Other descendant species, for humanity had not been the architect's only legacy, needed to be found and awakened. Marcus stood again on Unity Station, watching Earth below. But now he saw it differently. Not just humanity's birth world, but the seed from which a new generation of architects would grow. They would make mistakes, face new challenges, evolve in ways their predecessors never imagined. Sir, Chen approached. The Colony Council wants to know our next priority. Exploration? Consolidation? Finding other architect descendants. All of it, Marcus decided. We've proven we can face external threats. Now we prove we can build something better than what came before. He thought of that day on Kepler 442b, when he had been just a lost soldier facing incomprehensible oddness. how far they had all come, how far they still had to go. Scar appeared beside them, the Ravager having become a common sight on human stations. Makers have returned, old bonds renewed. But what new bonds? New purposes? It was a good question. The Protector species had been created for war, to defend against specific threats. With those threats defeated, they needed new roles, new reasons to exist beyond ancient imperatives. We explore together, Marcus said. We build together. The architects created you as guardians. But guardians of what? Not just against enemies, but for something greater. Help us find it. The Ravager's eyes brightened with something that might have been hope. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening. Human and Protector, creator-descendant, and created, working to forge something unprecedented. You know, Chun said quietly, when this started, when you first told us about awakening, I thought it was the end of humanity, that we'd lose ourselves becoming something else. Did we? Marcus asked. She considered. No, we became more human. Everything that made us unique. Our adaptability, our stubbornness, our ability to find hope in darkness. It all just got stronger. The architects gave us the tools. But what we build with them, that's purely human. Marcus smiled. She was right. They had the power to reshape reality, to impose their will on the cosmos. But they also had human wisdom, human compassion, human creativity. It would make them different from their predecessors, perhaps better in some ways. A communication alert chimed. New transmissions were coming in from across the galaxy. Colonies reporting full awakening. Protector species requesting guidance. Unknown signals that might be other descendants trying to make contact. The universe was suddenly full of possibilities. So what now? Chen asked. Marcus looked at the stars, at the infinite expanse where humanity would make its future, where they would carry the architect legacy forward, but in their own unique way, where every human would know they were part of something vast and meaningful. Now, he grinned, feeling younger than he had in years despite everything they'd endured. Now we do what humans do best. We explore, we learn, we grow, and we protect what matters. The awakening was complete. The invasion was defeated. But for humanity, for the descendants of the architects, the real adventure was just beginning. They had proven they could survive. They had proven they could fight. Now, they would prove they could build something worthy of their cosmic inheritance. And somewhere in the depths of space on 1,000 worlds, Protector species lifted their heads to the stars and felt something they had never known before. Anticipation. The Makers had returned. But more than that, they had returned as partners, not just masters. The future they would build together was limited only by imagination. Marcus Chun, the lost seal who had awakened humanity to its destiny, stood watching the stars with his friends. They had saved the galaxy. Now came the harder task, making it worth saving. But they were human. They were architects. They were the bridge between what was and what could be. They would not fail.